So in this presentation, what you're going to learn about is the basics of a concept called characterization. And characterization is just where we take the word character, which is like a noun, person, place, or thing, and we turn it into a verb, characterization, which just means the process of creating a character. And when authors create the characters, they go through a process to create characters. Now, they don't always think about it in such like specific terms I'm going to lay out here, but at the end, when you have a good character and a good story, typically the things I'm going to talk about here show up a lot, so you can kind of make inferences about what kind of character is this based on the things you have in the text. So to start, there's two types of characters, and oh, look at me for stretching out my pictures. There's two types of characters. One type of character is the protagonist, which is the main character. There's always a protagonist. Now, some people think of protagonist as like a good person. Usually, like in most stories, the protagonist is good. Protagonist doesn't have to be good, though. Protagonist is just the main character. Some stories follow a bad person. In the show Breaking Bad, Walter White is a guy who makes meth and sells it. He's a bad guy. He does the wrong thing. He's the protagonist. He's the main character. He's the one that we're following in the show. Not a good guy. But a protagonist is just the main character. The antagonist is the person in the story that works against the main character. Now, in every story, there's not always just one antagonist, but if you have a character versus character story, there's definitely an antagonist. It's the person the character is working against. Usually, agonist, antagonist, character-character conflict types of stories. All right, here's how authors create characters. Sometimes they can do this directly. The author tells us directly about the character. Usually this is either for like less important characters or for like kids books, like little kid stuff where they don't have a lot of time and a lot of words to use. Like by calling Dr. Evil, that's pretty direct. It's like his name is evil. He's clearly going to be pretty evil. Dr. Evil was an evil person. He used any power he had to accomplish whatever terrible deeds he could think of. If I wrote this in a story to describe Dr. Evil, this is being pretty direct about describing Dr. Evil. It's also kind of simple. It's not that interesting. It works okay for like a children's story. You're not going to see a lot of direct characterization in the kind of text you read. Typically, in the stories you're going to read, the authors create characterization indirectly. The author shows us things about the characters without telling us directly. And then as readers, we make inferences about what kind of person the character is. There's 5 different categories that we look at when we think about indirect characterization, or how an author might make a character kind of come to life for us. First one is speech. And that's, what does the character say and how does that character speak? So based on the things they say, or maybe based on the way that they speak, what are we supposed to think about that character in terms of like how they're going to act within the story? Then there's their thoughts. So what do we get to know about this character because of the way they think and because of the way they feel? Then we have their effect on others. The effect on others is one that people have a hard time remembering. It's the idea that, like, what do we know about this character based on how other people react to that character? Because of things that character says and does, how do other characters react, and what does that show us about the character? Then we have their actions, which is just straight up like, what are the things that they do that are important? And because of those important things, what can we then figure out about that character? And then their looks. And I mean, if you're an author and you're describing how a character looks, it should probably mean something, right? Like, you're going to probably describe that character to look a certain way because it should have an impact on the story. An author gets to create the whole world of the story, so they shouldn't waste details. So a character's looks matter in a story in the way they wouldn't for like a person in real life. People in real life don't get to choose how they look. Authors get to choose how characters look. And so authors are trying to tell us something by the way that their characters look. So in Max at Sea, you're going to go through and find one example of each of these things in the text, and you're going to make inferences about it. And you're going to learn how to do that in the next video, in the next step.